glad you're all here. Anybody cold besides me this morning? You feeling it's beautiful outside? I got my jacket on, so I'm just going to wear this for a while until I warm up. And once I get fiery, I'll take it off, and you know we're about to get really serious. So I love a movie as a dad. The dad in me loves a kids movie that has adult humor built into it, so that not only do the kids have a good time, but mom and dad can get a laugh. You know what I'm talking about? You know, it's just fun. So one of the classics that comes to mind is the movie Monsters, Inc. Anybody see Monsters, Inc. back 2001? It's a little dated. Great movie. There's a scene near the end of the movie that I love. So to kind of go back in your minds to this show, there's a like a door factory. I mean, the premise of the movie is that there's monsters, and the monsters sneak into kids' rooms at night and scare them, and you know, there's just a whole world of monsters is the idea. So there's this door factory where all these doors, these like, you know, doors, bedroom doors, closet doors are kept. And all the doors lead somewhere. You know, I think one leads to like the desert, one leads to the North Pole, one leads to, I think there's a yodeler, and one's like, they just lead random places, sometimes to bedrooms where kids might be, you know, afraid of the dark. And there's a scene where two of the monsters, Sully, I think, is chasing Randall through the doors, and it's chaos, right? And it's very funny because every door they open has a different scene, and so, you know, you're watching with your kids are laughing. Of course, I'm laughing because it's a funny moment. And as I thought about that this week, I thought, wow, that scene is not only great for the movie, but there's a principle of life in that scene that I think is so profound that we miss it. And it's this, that you and I are actually surrounded every single day by thousands of doors. Like, this is your life. Every day, there's doors everywhere. Like, maybe over the course of your lifetime, 10,000 doors or more that you can walk through. And every one of those doors leads somewhere. They represent opportunities, doors of opportunities, gateways that take you somewhere in life. And I think we're so used to walking through doors, we don't even think about it. Like even this morning, I don't think you've processed the doors you've walked through. You got up, and at some point, or maybe it's the middle of the night, maybe some of us multiple times, we walked through the bathroom door, right? You walk through the bathroom door into what? Anyone? The bathroom, yeah. At some point, you probably walked out of your bedroom door, and you walked into your living room. At some point, you walked out the front door, or through the garage door to get into your vehicle. You walked here, you walked through the lobby doors, you came into a space. Like, we walk through doors all day long, we don't even notice it. And yet the reality is every door you walk through leads somewhere. I would say this way, that your life, as short or as long as it's been, is in some ways nothing more than the sum total of the doors through which you have walked. That you are who you are where you are because of those doorways that you have chosen to walk through. And every one of us have a story to tell about a time in life where we walked through a door. We don't want to tell the story, actually. We'd rather not tell it, but it's a part of our past, right? We walked through a door we never should have gone through. And that door led to people, to places, to experiences that were not good for us, that were unhealthy, and affected our life in negative ways. You've also experienced what it's like to walk through a life-giving door, a door that changed your life and your future in a way that, like, you thought, this is like one of the best things happening. I walked through the gymnasium doors at Northwest College in August 1994, and I met Nicole. And almost 30 years of marriage later, like, my life is not the same, right? A door of opportunity that changed my life for the good. Doors. The truth is, some doors are more important in life than others. And there are certain experiences in life that you and I will never get the opportunity to experience unless we walk through those doors. I'm going to talk about one of those doors, those gateways, today. We're in a series called I Am, and we're talking about the 7 claims of Jesus in the Gospel of John. 7 claims Jesus made about himself, 7 things Jesus wanted you to know about him, that he felt were important enough to kind of raise to the top. If you have a Bible today, turn to John chapter 10. And every week we're in the Gospel of John, and so we're in John chapter 10 today. We'll start in verse 1. As you're turning there, let me give you the background, because like I said last week if you were here, the context of each of these I am statements is really, really important. This is kind of a fun one. So in John chapter 9, and you could read it later. It's actually probably worth your time to read because it's a crazy story. So here's the basics of what happens in John chapter 9 that sets up what we're about to read. Jesus heals a man who had been blind his whole life. Okay, man born blind, we don't know his name, but this man has his whole life been born blind, or has been blind. In a Jewish society in the first century, the assumption was that if you were blind, specifically if you were born blind, either like your parents had done something wrong and God's judgment was upon you, or maybe in utero, you were just a bad baby in utero and God was judged. Like, there was this sense of God's judgment upon you. And so there was this, this guy was considered to be like somebody that God had judged. And so Jesus comes along, speaks life and healing into this man, and heals him, gives him back his vision. The only problem was Jesus did it on the Sabbath. Naughty Jesus, right? And so the religious leaders, they're called Pharisees, the Jewish leaders are like, who do you think you are, like to heal on the Sabbath? And so because Jesus isn't there at the moment, they missed him before he left. They find this man that can now see, and they start grilling him with questions about what happened, and how can you see, and aren't you supposed to be blind, and did this man heal you today, and it's the Sabbath. And because this man will not take the side of the Pharisees and stand with them, they end up getting so frustrated that they kick him out of the synagogue. Okay, they like boot him out of the church. Like their actions make it clear that they assumed they were the gatekeepers of God. They got to decide who was in and who was out. Aren't you grateful the church stopped doing that about 2,000 years ago, that we don't? Oh, yeah, maybe not, right? I mean, some of us have an experience of that. I think about just conversations I had with some of you. I think about situations, I think of one particular, where we had to ask someone to no longer attend our church because of safety concern, deep safety concerns we had for individuals. One of the hardest conversations I've ever had as a pastor. And yet here's this group that just took it upon themselves like it was their God-given responsibility. You can come in, come on in. We'll open the door for you. You're out. And God has commissioned us to determine that. All of this goes down, right? And then at the end of this experience, there's a group of people that Jesus is with. Many of them are the Pharisees. This is like later on in the day, maybe the next morning. And Jesus continues the thought with what we're about to read. So that's the background. He goes to the group and he says to them, I tell you the truth. Anyone who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold, rather than going through the gate, must surely be a thief and a robber. But the one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice and come to him. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. After he has gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger. They will run from him because they don't know his voice. I'm not sure where this conversation happened. I guess it was just maybe, my guess would be, it was just right outside of town. You know, there's some fields nearby, maybe a hillside. And as Jesus is having this conversation with this small crowd, there was, I don't know, maybe a shepherd with some sheep nearby. And so Jesus taps into this illustration. Now, I will acknowledge what you probably already are assuming is I've not ever been a shepherd in my life. Anybody ever had shepherding experience before? Awesome, good. So I'm assuming we're all kind of at a deficit. This is not something that we know much about, but I did a little bit of research on first century shepherds this week, and I learned a lot. It's always fun to have to do that. So let's go back to what Jesus said, and let me kind of work through these verses and give us some context for what the first century listener would have understood in the story. Back to verse 1, Jesus says, I tell you the truth, anyone who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold, rather than going through the gate, must surely be a thief and a robber. So, sheepfolds. These were very common, a place to keep sheep, generally overnight. I think we got a picture of one. They were often made of stone, maybe of brick, and there would be usually one opening. Sometimes they would be built into a cave. I think we have a cave version here. So in this particular situation, part of it's covered. You just build a partial wall, and this is a more recent picture, obviously, so you got a gate there. But the sheep would go in through this entrance, and they would be able to stay in the sheepfold. And Jesus says in verse 1 that anybody who comes over the wall instead of through the gate, that's a problem, right? There's a reason why they're sneaking in over the wall. Like if you're coming in a way instead of coming through the main door, like why? What are you trying to hide? I mean, imagine going home today after the gatherings, and as you're pulling in the driveway, you look at your neighbor's house, you know your neighbor's out of town, and as you look, you happen to just catch the glimpse of somebody's, the back end of their body going in through a window, right? The assumption is, that must be a problem. That person has ill intent for that house. They have ill intent for my neighbor. They shouldn't be there. They're sneaking in an unhealthy way. Verse 2. But the one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper, we'll come back to that, opens the gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice and come to him. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. There were, in the first century, sometimes, this is my word, they were like shepherd co-ops, where shepherds would work together. You know, they'd have, I got mine, you've got your sheep, and let's all pull our sheep together, and we'll kind of help each other. So there'd be large sheepfolds where all of these sheep shepherds would bring their sheep together, and they would all go in the same sheepfold. And so you've got, and I don't know how big they could be. Let's say you got 100 plus sheep in here, and some are mine, some are yours, and some are, Shepherd Bob's, and we're all we're going to take turns, watching the sheep while others take care of other business or rest. And so when a shepherd needed to gather his or her sheep, it seems to me sheep all look the same. I couldn't tell the difference, right? So he would just stand, he would come through the gate, the gatekeeper, whoever was there, would let him in, and he would call his sheep. Notice how he would call them. He would call them by name. They actually knew the difference between their sheep. And their sheep would hear their names, they would hear the voice of the shepherd, and they would run, and maybe not quite single file, but they would kind of hop in line right there by the gate, and then the shepherd would lead them out. So cool that he would call them by name. He goes on in verse 4 and says, after he's gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. My visual would have been, up until this week as I thought about it, like I have a visual of cowgirls and cowboys on their horses. They've got the blue heeler, and the dogs are pushing the sheep, and they're driving the sheep, and they're corralling the sheep in a certain direction. That it would not have been the thought of the first century Jew. They knew that shepherds did not drive their sheep. Shepherds led their sheep. They would call to them, and the sheep would follow. I read this week that often shepherds, as they would lead their sheep, they would walk, they would sing. There's like these shepherd songs that they would sing. And as they would sing, it was their voice. It wasn't the clothing, and it wasn't the face of the shepherd that they immediately recognized, but it was the voice. And so as they would sing, the sheep could walk and hear and knew where to follow. Beautiful picture of what it means to lead sheep. Now, a lot going on here. There's a lot of context. People would have put all this together, but it may not make immediate sense, like what's Jesus getting at, and how does this have to do with anything that we just experienced with this man that was born blind and got kicked out of the synagogue? There's some confusion. So verse 6 says, those who heard Jesus use this illustration didn't understand what he meant, and so he explained to them. He said, I tell you the truth, I am the blank. You already saw it, but I'm covering it up anyway. Well, you would think Jesus might say, I am the shepherd for the sheep. Maybe some of us have heard that phrase before, that illustration. That would make sense that Jesus is the shepherd. He talked a lot. He doesn't say that, does he? What's he say? I am the gate for the sheep. An inanimate object. A gate for the sheep. All who came before me were thieves and robbers, but the true sheep did not listen to them. I just don't think anybody saw this line coming. I am the gate. You might have seen on some of the pictures I showed you a moment ago that, there was one opening to these sheepfolds that existed. And they didn't have doors. That was not something that they had in the first century. There was just an opening. And so what would happen is after the shepherd would lead his sheep into the sheep pen or the sheepfold, generally the shepherd would lay down and spend the evening sleeping across the entrance. That the shepherd would literally become the door. Like, would place his body there as a way to say, you know what, sheep, if you try to get out, guess what? You got to go over me. If somebody sneaks over the wall and wants to take the sheep out, they've got to come over me. Like, I'm putting myself in this position to become a literal gate that is the way in and the way out. You got to deal with me. It's kind of a cool way to think about what Jesus is saying here. He goes on to verse 9 and says, yes, I am the gate. Those who come in through me will be saved. Some translations of the Bible have a different word for saved. It says safety. They'll have safety. Those who come in through me will be or will have found safety. Think about what a sheepfold was to a sheep. It's where they spent the night. Almost never would a shepherd leave the sheep out in the field. He would almost always bring them back. So generally they would go out to pasture, and then as the sun was beginning to set, he would make sure that he could get his sheep home into the safety and security of the sheepfold. There were times where they were so far away, they would have to kind of makeshift different sheepfolds, or maybe certain distant places they had some that had been built that were there for them. But most of the time, he would lead them home, and the sheep knew what it was like. It's like if you're on a horse and you ride somewhere and you turn around and the horse knows it's heading home, right? It just kind of, you got to control it. It's like, we're going home. It's a place of safety. They knew that that was a good place for them to be at night. I think this says something about, for you and I think it tells us this, that there's a longing in all of us to come home. This is actually the story of the Bible. If you want to think about the overall kind of uber story of the Bible, it's this, that humanity longs to come home. We go to the very beginning of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1. We see God create this beautiful garden, the Garden of Eden, this place of wonder. And who does he place in the garden to live? He places a man and a woman. We call them Adam and Eve. And their job was to live there, to care for it and tend. It was home. And if we read the story, we don't make it very far in the Bible at all. Genesis chapter 3, just a couple of pages in, and Adam and Eve choose to do their own thing rather than God's. They go their own way, and sin enters the story, and they find themselves banished from home. They leave home. And there's a sense of sadness and loss that's profound. There's no belonging for them anymore. Like the relationship they have with God has been forever changed in that moment. And there's this clear sense, even though it's not stated directly, that like they long to be home again. If only we could go back, but they couldn't. And that story has now unfolded over throughout the entire Bible. The Exodus, the next book of the Bible, talks about the very thing. As the people of Israel found themselves living in Egypt, they found themselves enslaved. They longed to be free, to be back in the land where their father Jacob had lived, and to be free again, like to have our own home. We see that unfold in the story of the exile. We talked about that earlier this year for quite a while, where the Jewish people were carted off to Babylon. They longed to go back to Jerusalem where they could call home again. We see it in the very first century when Jesus was alive, when the people were controlled, the Jews were controlled by Rome. There was a sense of being freed again. Even though they were still in their physical land that was theirs, it didn't feel like home because it was ruled and occupied by a foreign government. There was this longing to experience the safety and belonging again of just like, we're back where we are, where we always were designed to be with God. There's peace, there's safety. Enter you and me. I think the same is true for you and I, that every one of us, because of the story of the scriptures, we know that we all find ourselves homeless. That we traded the safety and security and the belonging that we had with God for the ability and the freedom to do what we wanted when we wanted to do it. I want to make my own choice, go my own way, and that breaks relationship with God. And we find ourselves now absent that sense of belonging. And because God loves us so much, he's always, as we see throughout the story of the Bible, inviting us home. Like, come on back, come on back. And that culminates with Jesus, right? When Jesus says, here, I'm the gate. Yeah, the Father wants you to come home. And so what? He sent me. I'm your ticket home. You want to come home? You got to come through me. I'm the gate. I'm the way back into that safety, that sense of belonging that you were created to experience in the very beginning. See, doors, gates do a great job of letting things in. That's one of the things they do. Jesus says, I'm your way in. But doors don't just let things in, do they? They also let things out. They're an entry point and they're an exit point. And so not only does Jesus say, hey, I'm your ticket in, I love what he says next. I think it's still a continuation of verse 9. He says, of the sheep, they will come and go freely and will find good pastures. This phrase, come and go freely, was a colloquial phrase in Jewish thought. It was very, very common. It represented pure and complete freedom. You know, the ability to come and go freely. Like, remember when you were a teenager and you're like, I can't wait to move out. I can come and go freely, right? I don't have to get permission. There's a sense of like, I can go when I want. I can come when I want. There's no cost to that. Like, it was a statement of longing to just be able to come and go freely. A beautiful statement. And it applies so well because shepherds didn't put sheep in the sheepfold to keep them there forever. We would call that a bad shepherd. Are you with me? Yep, they're there, they stay there, they never come out. I've got them, I don't want to lose any, so I'm just going to keep them there. That's not at all. See, a shepherd used a sheepfold for two specific reasons. For ownership and for protection. That's part of what the sheep pen or the sheepfold communicated, ownership and protection. Now, again, most of us probably have not owned a sheep in our lives, but anybody ever own a dog? Any dog owners out there? By show of hands. Good. Yeah, so let's kind of shift the metaphor a little bit to something we can understand a little more. We have owned dogs in the past, and so let's talk about ownership and protection. We had a dog named Storm. Storm was a husky, and huskies love to run, so we built a kennel on the side of the house, and Storm loved to break out of the kennel. And he got pretty good at it. I was home one day by myself, and I got a call from someone. I found out a few moments later it was a neighbor, and they're like, yeah, Eric, your dog is in my garden destroying some of my plants. And I thought, oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that's happening, but just to clarify, that's not my dog. And they're like, no, it's your dog. I said, no. I said, I was just outside 3 minutes ago. My dog's in the kennel. It's not my dog. I'm so sorry. I said, well, it's funny because I'm holding Storm's collar, and I got your phone number off of his collar. And I said, oh, Storm. That's my wife's dog. You should have clarified. Not mine, right? Now, Storm didn't cease being my dog when it got out of the kennel. Wouldn't that be great, by the way, if when your dog ran away, it wasn't your dog anymore? Like, my dog's here at the house. Like, if it's in the house, it's in the kennel, it's on the leash. But once it's off, it's like, not mine anymore. But that's not how ownership works. The reason your dog is in your house, that's not what makes it yours. It's in your house because it is yours. Like, there's a sense of, these belong to me. And so the shepherd would bring his sheep together and put them in the sheep pen. They belong to me. That's why they're here. There's a sense of ownership. How about protection? There was a time when Storm got out of the kennel and took off and was gone for a number of hours. I think the next morning when we woke up, we found Storm, and he had obviously lost a fight with a porcupine. Like, it was very obvious in the face, like just dozens, if not hundreds of little quills, and some of you experienced that before with your dog. And of course, there's nothing we could do. We had to take him to the vet and get all that taken care of. How'd that happen? Pretty simple. He got away from the protection of the kennel. And there was nothing at that point when he was gone we could do. We couldn't provide overnight the safety and security he needed. And so he picked a fight with the wrong end of a porcupine, and the rest was history. Ownership and protection. Dog owners have kennels. Shepherds have sheep folds or sheep pens for this very purpose. And the goal, again, isn't to leave them in there the entire time. Like, if you do that to your dog, we all know that's like borderline abusive to your dog, to not ever let it out of the kennel. The same would be true. It would be unhealthy for the sheep to never leave the sheep pen. So they're there for a while until the time comes where it's like, all right, I think we're ready. I can lead you out to good pastures now. Let's go find what we need. Like, green pasture, good grass for the sheep isn't found in the, I almost said kennel, and now I'm mixing metaphors. It isn't found in the sheepfold. Are you with me? You know you find in the sheepfold? When you have a lot of sheep, it's just a bunch of crap, yeah. Or poo is probably a better word for it. Right? Is that maybe it's a good metaphor for the church. I don't know. But if there's nothing growing, there's nothing for them to eat, right? It just piles up. It gets worse. The only way for them to find good pasture is to leave the sheepfold. They're going to come and go freely, and I'm going to lead them to good pastures. And then Jesus says these words in verse 10, and these are popular words. Well, no, they're important words to us. They're part of where we get our mission. But this is the context of it. Jesus then says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they, my sheep, may have life and have it to the full. He talks about that thief that climbs over the wall. He says the reason the thief sneaks in, tries to do it under the cloak of darkness when the shepherd can't see, is because he wants to steal, kill, and destroy. He wants to cause harm. He wants to take that which does not belong to him. And Jesus says, not me. I have come. I'm here so that my sheep can experience the fullness of life possible. I want them to experience the best life ever. And that will not be found by just them staying in the sheepfold their entire lives. There's a time and a place. We're going to stay there when there's a need for ownership and protection. But at some point, I'm going to lead them out, and they're going to follow me. I'm going to call them by name, and they're going to come. And I'm going to lead them to green pastures where they can find the goodness and joy of life. I think we get this so wrong in the church. And I hate the fact that people outside the church assume this about the way that the church talks, but I think it's that we create this. There's this understanding sometimes we have that like somehow following Jesus means that we say yes to him. He's like, all right, and so he kicks us into the sheep pen and he locks the door and we're never allowed out. He's like, no, you're mine now. Stay in there and be quiet. That's kind of life. Like if Jesus could just bring us together, he's going to protect us, he'll hold on to us, and he'll never let us out there because there's bears out there. There's danger out there. So he's like, I'm going to keep you in this nice little protect. No. He brings us in. He invites us in through himself, through Jesus. But then his point is to lead us out. The full life we talk about, when we talk about our mission, we want every person to experience full life in Jesus Christ. That full life, friends, will not be found sitting in this building together. Are you with me? It's a part of it, right? There's protection in terms of relationships, right? When we're together, we're not out there by ourselves. So there's value, there's ownership, there's a sense that we belong to one another and we belong to Jesus. But the full life he wants you to experience is actually found when you leave the safety and security of the sheepfold and you follow Jesus. You don't sneak out. You follow Jesus out into the life he's called you to live. And you just stay in tune with him and you live a life every single day where he leads you in such a way that it brings him honor and glory. And that's difficult and it can be dangerous and can be risky. And at times you're like, I'll be a lot safer back in the sheepfold. Yeah, there is. But there's not green pasture there. So trust me and let me lead you out. That's why I'm here, to lead you out so you can experience the goodness and the joy of life. I'm the gate. I'm the way in. But I'm also the one that leads you out. Practically, I just thought of a fun little metaphor that we sometimes use that might help us think this through a little bit more. Maybe you've heard this before. You hear people say, when God opens or closes a door, he opens a window. You ever heard that? Anybody ever said that like me? I've said it before, I'll admit it. Anybody ever said that besides me? Just Pam and I, the rest of you are liars. Some of you have said it. We're talking next week on dishonesty. That's our next topic. So Pam and I, we get this, like, when he closes the door, he opens a window. That sounds so cute. Like that, it's like write that on a Hallmark card, send that to someone. A friend loses a job or applies for promotion and doesn't get it. That's a great thing. It sounds so good, like, oh yeah, your opportunity is coming. The problem is, it's just not true. When God closes a door, he doesn't want you climbing through a window. Like, what kind of God would be like, I shut the door in hopes that we would go sneak around the house, try to find an unlocked latch, and then climb in anyway? When God closes the door, it's because he doesn't want you to go in, right? Are we on the same, right? We get that? I mean, who climbs through windows? We've already talked about this. Thieves and teenagers that are trying to sneak out. Anybody teenagers with me? You sure? Yeah. I mean, I want to ask the question of you, but I'll acknowledge I snuck out a couple of times through a window. Can you imagine if I pulled this on my dad? Hey, Dad, I know that you love me, and I know that you lock the door at night, but I know you're a good dad, so you anytime you lock a door, you'll open a window. So I just snuck out the back window. He'd be like, you're grounded, son. Go to your room. Right? That would not go well. When God closes the door, there's a reason for it. So instead of saying this cute little myth to people, how about this? Here's the truth. God is the door. That's a new way of thinking about it. When God is the door, when he moves to open it, walk through. When he stands in the doorway to close it, wait. Don't go try to find a window. No, to find a window means I'm trying to acquire or experience something. I'm trying to find alternative means to get that which God has told me no to. So instead, if he's the gate, if he's the door, when he closes it, I just wait. And I trust he's got something planned for me. It could be because there's danger on the other side. And danger could come in lots of different forms. Often we're the ones that would cause danger to ourselves. It's not that even that there's outside threats. It's like we bring so much of that upon ourselves. But when he opens it, we follow him into the life he's called us to. We're going to pick up next week in the next verse 11, and kind of look at a different metaphor, a different I am statement that Jesus gives us. But today, this is it. Jesus says, I am the gate. And what he's saying to us is, I'm your only way in. It's through me. Your only way home. Back to that place of belonging, security with me, that sin broke. It's through me and me alone. I'm the gate. I am the only one who can lead you out. And when I move to leave and I call you by name, I want you to follow me. And as you follow me and I lead you to green pastures, this would have had a metaphor for the Jewish people of Psalm 23, right? He leads me beside still waters. He leads me to green pastures. They would have connected this messianic divine thought. When God moves, your job and mine is to follow him and to trust him and to stay close, to stay connected, not wander off, but to trust he's leading us somewhere on purpose. I believe for some of us, and I was praying this before I came up here as I just looked over you. I pray this every week before I come up here to teach because I don't know where you're all at with Jesus. I mean, I know where best I can, I know where I'm at, but that's a daily thing I have to process. Some of you have maybe never said yes to Jesus before. And I just want you to know if that's you, he's calling your name today. He's standing here in this moment, and he's calling your name, and he's inviting you to follow him. And he wants to lead you to the best life you could possibly experience. Will not be an easy life, won't always be a safe life. Actually, it's a very dangerous life to live fully dedicated and devoted to Jesus. But that's what he wants to call you into. And I would encourage you to say yes to him today. That's how you have that relationship with God restored. It's how you experience the life he created you to live. Maybe others of you know Jesus, and he's calling your name, but you're being a little stubborn, and you're not ready to move just yet. And maybe today's a day where you say, okay, it's back to the simple reality of following Jesus, which is an issue of surrender. It's time for me to just move and step into the life he's calling me into. So I want to pray that over us. If you just close your eyes with me for a moment. It's not fun to study Bible stories that tell us that we're sheep. Sheep don't have the greatest reputation for being smart animals. But the metaphor comes right out of the first century. It would have been so appropriate, so applicable to their minds. And so we, with an understanding of that, embrace this idea that not only is Jesus a good shepherd, but today he says to you, I am the gate. I'm your way home. And God's calling you, friends. He's inviting you home. And the only way home is through Jesus. It's not over the wall. It's not through a window. It's to come through the work and the person of Jesus. This is why Jesus came, to show us how to live, to show us what love looks like. When he died on the cross to pay the penalty for your sin and mine, not his own. And to trust in what he did when he conquered sin and death on the cross, when he rose again 3 days later. To trust in that is to experience the joy and forgiveness and the new life he offers you. If that's you today, man, I just want to encourage you to say yes to Jesus. Again, he's calling your name. Just say, Jesus, I hear you, and I'm ready to follow. Man, today's my day. I'm going to do this with you. If that's you today, would you just wave a hand at me and say, Eric, I'm asking Jesus to be my leader, to lead me into the home that he's created for me. Awesome. Love that. Yeah, he's inviting you home. If you need some courage, or maybe there's just a bit of rebellion in you and it's time to overcome it. And it's time for you to step out and follow Jesus into the life he's calling you into. You've been hesitant. You've been holding back. There's something maybe he's been whispering to you, but you've just been saying no to because of fear, anxiety, or the past, or it could be a host of reasons. And today you're feeling challenged. I need to step out and follow into the life he created me to live. Would you just wave a hand to heaven and say, Jesus, I'm going to be a faithful follower of you when you call me? Great. A couple of you. Awesome. Awesome. Good. So, Jesus, we thank you for loving us so much, for showing us what life looks like when it's done well. And apart from you, and not just your example, but your redeeming, renewing work in our lives, there's no way we could get there by ourselves. Today, we've been reminded that it is all about you, Jesus. It starts and it finishes with you. You're the way in, and you're also the way out. And so I just pray that we would, maybe the word for me today is just like this spirit of submission to you, to acknowledge that if I am a sheep and you are the shepherd and the gate, you want to lead me through yourself into a place where I belong. You want to lead me out and guide me into the world where you can lead me to good pastures. There are good pastures in this world, this place where I'm fulfilling the purpose and the design you created me for. And so may I be willing to boldly walk out from safety and security into a world that can sometimes be scary and trust that you've got something special for me there. Jesus, thank you that you get to determine who's in and who's out. It's not the job of religious leaders in the first century. It's not the job of religious leaders or even religious people today. We don't get to make that call. We leave that to you, and we just trust that our responsibility is to be faithful, to be the people you've called us to be, and to lift you up, Christ, as best we can. May that spirit just emanate from us in everything that we say and do. We just love you so much, Jesus. We love you for loving us. We're changed because you love us. We respond by living a life dedicated to you. You love us for who we are, not for what we do. For that, we're so grateful. And today we pray all of this in your strong name. You are the gate of Jesus Christ. And everybody said amen together. Amen. Cedar Hills, thank you for being here. Enjoy each other's company. Have a cup of coffee. Make a friendship. And we'll see you next week. Thanks.